We have the pleasure of having with us on Budget Day a person who is now a dynamic figure in taking part along with his Chief Minister and his team in Tamil Nadu, the future of the economy of that state. Dr. P. Thiaga Rajan, Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Thiaga Rajan, thanks very much for taking out that time to speak to us. Let me start it off with a simple thought, sir. What is your takeaway from what you've seen the Union Finance Minister announce today?
First, thank you for having me on. And, like any budget, there are some things we like more and some things we are not that satisfied with. Let me talk about the positives first. I think the fact that the budget was read in English, which allowed people like me to understand what was being said fully, as well as the global markets to hear from the Finance Minister's own mouth, the policy of the government. Also, the restraint shown despite the state elections and despite the kind of pressures of politics, the restraint shown in keeping the fiscal parameters in check, relatively speaking, as well as the focus on some infrastructure for services like the banks in the post offices and the digital banks in the districts, and the visionary outlook on some things like the green bonds to create jobs in the environmentally friendly industry, the battery swapping model for EVs, the focus on startups and new technology, the continuation of the MSME relief program, which we had asked as a state when we met with the Union Finance Minister on December 30th. So these are all positive things, I think, in the budget.
Okay, you've been very vocal on GST issues, sir, which is a fundamental matter for states. In the past couple of years, there has been several issues because we've seen the unprecedented moral hazard of the government at times saying that we are unable to transfer a certain section of GST. Today, are you feeling more comfortable with the GST situation, both without and within the budget, sir?
Well, I first want to disabuse people of this notion that we should be thrilled by saying that we had a record collection in January, right? Under normal circumstances, if you take out seasonal cyclicality, every month, every year, you should find a new record collection in GST or in any tax for that matter. That's how the system works, unless there's a timing gap because of the date of payment and all that. The economy is growing, the value of money is shrinking because of inflation, and the population is growing. So in every way, on notional terms, you should find that you have an increase in GST collection or in any tax collection on at least on a smooth basis, taking out seasonal adjustments. Whether that translates to continuing compensation or not is a whole different issue. And as I've said elsewhere, it's not clear to me, because there's still so many constitutional uncertainties about GST, whether that is a decision the union government can make as part of its budget or whether that needs to be made by the GST Council in one of the GST Council meetings. But I have made the very clear point that if the GST compensation for the 14% year-over-year growth is not continued beyond June 2022 as it is now slated, even though the cess will continue till the government can repay what they think is the RBI zero interest loan, which is basically monetizing that deficit, then I think some states are going to have a really, really difficult time continuing their programs and balancing their books and feeding their poor.
Okay.
Thankfully, Tamil Nadu is not one of them. I think we can manage without it if we had to, but it would be tough. But the big poor states, economically poor states like the UPs, the Bihars, are going to have a really tough time if they don't get that compensation, let alone the relatively well-to-do.
Okay, Dr. Thiaga Rajan, what about this 1 lakh crores in capital expenditure, grants to states, zero interest loans? What do you make of this?
I think somebody very creative in accounting has been sitting at the kind of computer. I think they've moved a bunch of revenue spending, which used to come as revenue spending under schemes and grants from the union government for things like smart city, etc. And they figured, why should they spend it as revenue and then we get to do capital expenditures with it? They'll just shift it into the other bucket and give themselves the benefit of A, making their revenue expenditures and revenue deficit look like a smaller percentage of the overall deficit. B, make it look like there's this huge surge in capital investments when it's really just transfer. And that's incidentally in keeping with the last 2 years record. I can give you the exact example.
Okay. So you see that as accounting. Okay. Okay. I have to ask you, Dr. Thiaga Rajan, no specifics this time, but last time around there were specifics regarding ports and infrastructure projects in Tamil Nadu. And that, of course, was at a time before the election. What's the progress being made? So are we seeing the port projects, the infrastructure projects in Tamil Nadu, actually with central assistance moving on?
Yeah, I would say it's a mixed bag, right? I think, if you look at the announcements, our Chief Minister has put out a statement where he says there were no specific Tamil Nadu related projects, or none of the requests we had made for things like flood relief support and the NDRF, etc., have been mentioned, and so we consider it a disappointment. But I would say that in many cases, there's a gap between intent and execution. It's not only in this. I think I wrote an article in one of the Delhi newspapers. I said, we talk a lot about the budget, but the budget is only a statement of intent.
Yes.
A year from now, there'll be a revised estimate. That gives you some idea. And then a year from then, there'll be the final account. That really knows what's happening.
Okay.
So we spend too much time worrying about intent and not enough time.
So let me then do a little bit of deep dive. I know time is limited, so we can't cover everything. But what is then the vision for Tamil Nadu in the space that we are seeing emerging in the space sector? I've interviewed so many space startups coming in from Chennai. In this sector of electronics manufacturing, in AI, in all the new data metrics that are coming out. We're talking about augmented reality, virtual reality. What is the space that you and Mrs. Stalin envision for Tamil Nadu?
Well, I think we want to be, both in terms of technology and in terms of human talent, the premier kind of origination point, not just in India, but in Southeast Asia or maybe South Asia. If you cross the entire spectrum from software as a service, where we're a big player, to deep technology, to implementation. I attended the CII Connect event in Chennai about 2 months ago, and we saw so much innovation in drone technology, in kind of pipeline repair, in automation, in automated mass cooking. There's so much that the government itself can adopt. So we're trying to come up with a comprehensive policy where the government is a promoter, investor, and customer for all of these companies, and that we can leverage that support, like some other states have done. I think Telangana has something like that going on. And we can, use the fact we have some couple of really interesting advantages. The first and foremost is that because of a century of focus on education from the Justice Party days, we have the highest gross enrollment ratio of any state by a factor of, 10 or 15%. We have 52% of our college-age children go to college. The Indian average is somewhere in the low 20s or mid-20s. And the second state after us is maybe in the high 30s, Kerala. So we have this educated workforce, and because of our location, because of connectivity, because a lot of the internet pipes going through either Mumbai or Chennai, and the history of kind of foreign enterprise, global enterprise coming here, and our diaspora in the valley and in other places, we have a good fit.
Okay, so what's the last question to you? So what is the future? Are we then seeing Tamil Nadu become the real gateway of India through the ports, through the logistics, through human resource?
Yeah, I certainly we have a shot at it, and certainly the Chief Minister has a vision for it. I would say this year has been a year of consolidation, at least as far as I'm concerned. After 8 years of continued record revenue deficits and continued decay in every fiscal indicator, we are going to show a turning point. We're going to show that we have started to bring the system under control and move into a positive phase, despite coming to power after 10 years, despite being new at our jobs, despite second wave, despite third wave, despite kind of fulfilling poll promises. So I think we build the platform. This year we did the consolidation, and from next year onward, surely our ambition is to be that. The Chief Minister leads the way, and we feel confident we can be that kind of gate.
Okay. Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan, we wish you the best in this journey in showcasing not only the history, culture, language, but also the economic prowess of Tamil Nadu and conversion of that state into the gateway into India, both in terms of trade, in terms of cargo, in terms of investment, in terms of human resource, because there's a lot of potential, and we are cheering you on. Thanks very much for joining us on this telecast.
Thank you very much for having me.